Good. How's everybody doing? Welcome. Good to see you all. My name is Darryl Rodgers. I'm a speaker. Obviously, I'm here speaking, right? I'm a speaker. I'm an author, and I'm a family recovery coach. I coach parents who have a son or daughter battling drug or alcohol addiction. So I have a story for you today. Before I start the story, I know that probably not everybody can see, depending on where you're sitting, but I have 3 pairs of shoes down here and a shoe box. I'm going to start out talking about that a little bit, and I will weave the shoes back into the story at the end. You'll understand the purpose of the shoes. I just want to start out by saying I've not walked a mile in your shoes. I don't know what your life has been like. You haven't walked a mile in my shoes. You don't know what my life has been like. But today I hope to give you a glimpse through the story of what it might have been like to walk a mile in one of these pair of shoes that you see up here. I'm going to hold them up real quick just so everybody can see them. So, it was October the 15th, 2011. I was attending a high school football game in Virginia. Now, before I get going with the story, let me start out with a scripture verse. Proverbs 5:3 says that to acknowledge Him. Lean not on your own understanding, but acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He will make your path straight. So, as we go through life, we come up on a lot of decisions that we have to make. And every day we make decisions. And we need wisdom. We need guidance. We need understanding. We need courage to make the right decisions, to make the best decisions. So keep that in mind as we go through the story. It was October 15, 2011. I was attending a high school football game in Virginia. It was a beautiful day for football, a lot like today. Maybe a little bit clearer, not so many clouds. But it was a beautiful day for football. It was a Saturday afternoon game. Perfectly manicured field. Stands packed full of fans because the home team was celebrating their homecoming. My son Chase was a starting cornerback on the visiting team. For those of you who don't know much about football, I'll explain. There's probably a lot of football fans here, but cornerback's job is primarily to cover the wide receivers on this side of the field. He's a defensive back. Make sure they don't make the catch. And to come up on run plays to his side of the field, try to make a tackle when he can. Chase would also play special teams, punts, kickoffs, and occasionally played a little bit of wide receiver on offense. Well, this day was all defensive special teams. And, you know, Chase, it was his senior year. He was only 5'10", about 150 pounds, not very big for a football player, but what he lacked in size, he made up for with tenacity, hustle, and love for the game. And this day was no different. He was hustling out there, making plays everywhere, playing really hard. And it was a close game. The lead went back and forth several times, and we came down to the end of the game, 1 minute left to play. 1 minute left to play. We're behind by 7 points. Behind by a touchdown and an extra point. We had the ball inside of our own 5-yard line. It was 4th and long. So we had 95 yards to go to tie this game up with 1 minute left. We needed a big play right now, right here. Our opponents will get the ball back. They run the clock out, and we go home with a loss. Chase had not played one down of offense all day long. All of a sudden, I saw him run in from the sideline into the offensive huddle, and I knew what was about to happen because I'd seen it before, because I knew what kind of a person Chase Rodgers was. I knew what kind of an athlete he was. The huddle broke. Chase lined up in the slot as a receiver. Our quarterback took the snap from the shotgun formation. He dropped back a few steps. Chase used his speed to beat the defensive backs deep, and our quarterback threw him a perfect spiral. Ended up being about a 60-yard pass. I watched Chase reach his hands out to grab that pass. He tucked it away, and he took a few more steps before he was dropped down from behind. I knew he would rise to the occasion. He gave us a first down and put us deep in our opponent's territory. 2 plays later, our running back ran one in. We kicked the extra point to tie the game up. We ended up winning that game in triple overtime when we scored a 2-point conversion. I rushed down to the activity bus where Chase's teammates and his coaches, they were all gathering around outside the activity bus celebrating the big win. I could see Chase coming in the distance, coming towards me, big grin on his face. And I went to meet him. I gave him a big hug, congratulated him on the big win and that big play that he made. We all celebrated outside the activity bus there for a while. Eventually, they all filtered onto that bus and made their way back to the high school. Chase was attending a military school at that time, a boarding school in Virginia. So I went back home. I lived here in Cary. I went back home to Cary. The next day, I had a phone call from Chase's head coach, and he said, "Mr. Rodgers, that was an amazing game that Chase played. I couldn't ask for anything more for me and my players. He hustled out there all day long, gave me everything he had, and then when we needed him the most, he came in there at the end and made that big catch to put us in a position to be able to win the game." But there's one more thing I need to tell you. Chase broke his foot in the first part of the game, didn't tell anybody. He played the entire game on a broken foot. Now, I don't encourage any young athletes to play injured. He didn't know his foot was broken. He knew it hurt bad. He was a competitor. He didn't want to come out of the game. He was a team player. He stayed in and they won the game, but he was out the rest of the season on crutches. He only played 6 games his senior year because of that, but despite that, he made first team all-conference, honorable mention all-state, and there were a few college scouts that showed some interest in him. There was a school out of state that offered Chase some scholarship money, Division II type athletics, offered him some scholarship money to come and play football there and attend college there, and he took them up on that offer and he headed off to college. It wasn't long after he arrived at college that Chase began to hang out with people who were abusing drugs and alcohol. Pretty soon he was abusing drugs and alcohol. You become a lot like the people that you associate with. Early on in the second semester of his freshman year, he dropped out of college. He moved back home. He was hanging out with an even rougher crowd back home. A lot more transpired there, but I became very worried about him because he moved out at one point, and I was keeping up with him on social media. He was losing weight rapidly. Wasn't very big to begin with. Now he was rail thin. He was pale, glassy-eyed. And this word popped into my head, intervention. I didn't know much about what an intervention was, but I knew I needed one for Chase. I was scared to death. And I called this intervention company. They sent a guy to my house. We had an intervention for Chase there at our house, and we were able to get him into treatment in South Florida. He spent 30 days in treatment, then he went to a halfway house. He bounced around to several different halfway houses in South Florida, spent about 9 months there total. Then he came back home. He was doing a lot better. He was staying away from the people who had been a bad influence before. He was going to IOP, intensive outpatient care, like group therapy, 2 nights a week. And he got a job. We felt like we had the old Chase back. When I say we, I mean me, our family, Chase's closest friends, the ones that weren't using drugs. We felt like this was the old Chase. This was the guy that we knew. But as the months went by, I didn't know anything about addiction at the time. As months went by, Chase began to relapse. I didn't know what was happening exactly, but I knew something was going on. It wasn't good. And finally, he came to me one day and said, "Dad, you know, I'm hanging around a rough crowd again. I'm headed in a bad direction." I said, "I know, Chase. I kind of sensed it." And he said, "I don't know what to do about it, but I know I need to get away from these people who are a bad influence on me." And he said, I've taken a job transfer to Florida, back to the area where I was in treatment. He told me when he was planning to leave, I told my wife, Kim made Chase promise that he would come by and have a meal with us before leaving for Florida. Well, the day came, he was supposed to come by and eat with us. He didn't show up. It was getting later in the afternoon. We were sitting around kind of waiting on him, and we moved to the living room. My wife, Kim, and I, our youngest son, Justin, was in the 8th grade at the time. We're in the living room, just kind of hanging out, talking a little bit, surfing our phones, when I had a phone call from a friend of mine. I didn't want to disturb Kim and Justin with my phone conversation, so I went outside. It was a nice day out, May 29th, 2014. I go outside, standing in my front lawn, talking to my friend. City of Raleigh police cruiser pulls up to the curb in front of my house. I said, man, I got to go. Apparently Chase is in some kind of trouble. He'd never been in any trouble with the law before, but I knew he was heading in a bad direction fast. So I hang up with my friend, and I go to meet that officer in my driveway. And that's where he told me, Mr. Rodgers has been a bad wreck out on I-40. And your son, Chase, died at the scene. I've told this story thousands of times, and it's still not easy to get through. But he asked me, he said, and it just so happened, right where we were standing, I can't tell you how many times I threw Chase a pass. And I threw it just out of reach, just to watch him use his athleticism, make diving catches. We spent a lot of time together, helping him practice his sports, going fishing, camping, all that kind of stuff. So it took me a little while to wrap my head around what this officer was saying. Finally, I looked at him and just in disbelief, I asked, "You fit?" He kind of dropped his head and said, "Yes, sir." He asked me, "Is there anybody inside you'd like me to notify?" I said, "Well, my wife and my other son are in there, but that's my job. Wasn't looking forward to it. I said, that's my job. Let me do that. Let me tell him." He asked me, "Can I go in with you for support?" And I agreed to that. So we go in through the front door. I go in first. He's coming in behind me. I look to my right. I make eye contact with my wife, Kim, sitting there in the recliner. Justin's back on the sofa in the corner. Split second later, this officer comes in the door behind me, and I can see the expression on my wife's face change to one of terror, because she knows whatever I'm about to say is not going to be good when she saw that officer walk in the door. And I just had to come out and tell her, "Honey, this has been a bad wreck, and Chase is dead." And of course, we all cried for a long time. It took a while to get settled down. And when we did, we began to ask the officer questions about what had happened. Didn't have a lot of answers that day. There was a rumor going around that there had been a big going away party the night before. Pretty sure it was accurate rumor. There was a big going away party, and a lot of drugs and alcohol were consumed at that party. And Chase, some of his friends, woke up late the next morning feeling a little hungover, feeling a little nauseous. So they said, "Hey, let's all go to the park, smoke some weed to help with our nausea, help cope with our nausea." Then Chase let an 18-year-old girl, really pretty girl, who had smoked with him, get behind the wheel of his car. He got in the front passenger seat of his own car. Another young man got in the back seat. They left that park. They only went a couple of miles, made a quick stop to grab a bite to eat, got out on I-40, headed eastbound, made it a couple more miles before she lost control of Chase's car in a curb running about 70 miles per hour. The car spun out of control, left the road, struck a tree, impacted on the driver's side rear door. It was a four-door compact. Car rolled up on its side, and when it did, the tree came right across where Chase was sitting. He died at the scene. It took firefighters and emergency personnel almost an hour to get the three of them out of the vehicle. They transported the two survivors to the hospital right away with serious injuries. 7 months later, and with just a few weeks prior to what would have been her first court appearance, the driver died after a fire broke out in her apartment. Fire chief says, based on their investigation, they believe that she poured gasoline all over the floor of her apartment, stood in the middle of it, and ignited it. And 2 suicide notes were found. So I know it's a rough story. Believe me, I know it's hard to hear. It's hard for me to tell it. But I tell it because there's so many little nuggets of wisdom, so many little life lessons embedded in it. And I'm looking at a lot of really pretty young ladies here. You know what? Beauty starts on the inside. That's where the real beauty is. You got your whole lives ahead of you, and you have decisions to make. Brings me back to the shoes. This is literally the pair of shoes that Chase was wearing when he played that football game. The pair of cleats he was wearing at football game I told you about, where he made that big catch, left me that amazing memory. Little did I know when I was watching that game, that would be the last football game I'd ever watch him play. He was redshirted when he went to college, so he didn't get any playing time. This pair of shoes, the pair of shoes I wore to Chase's funeral. I walked up to the casket wearing this pair of shoes right here. I hope no parent out here listening to this ever have to wear a pair of shoes like this. And I want to tell you something. You're a young lady sitting here listening to this today. Don't put your parents through that. Don't put your parents through that. Make wise decisions. You don't know what it's like. I'm going to tell you something. Even harder than walking in this pair of shoes is every night not knowing where your child is, not knowing what they're doing, having butterflies in the pit of your stomach that never go away, and knowing that whatever they're doing is probably not good. And when the phone rings late at night, and the first thing that pops into your head is that the police call? What do they want? Then there's this pair of shoes, the pair of shoes that represents the driver. This pair of shoes is loaded with guilt and shame. I don't want you to ever have to wear a pair of shoes like this. Think before you get behind the wheel of a car. And then here's the shoebox. There's an imaginary pair of shoes in this shoebox. And today I want you to put on these shoes. If you will. These shoes are the shoes of decision. They're called decision. That's the name of these shoes, decision. You can make a decision today, right here, right now. You can make a decision that you're not ever going to drive impaired. You can make a decision that when somebody comes to you and offers you drugs or alcohol, that you just say, no thanks. But how do you do that? What's that pair of shoes really look like? Remember I talked about wisdom, understanding, but along with that comes courage. You can have all the knowledge, you can have all the wisdom, you can have all the understanding, but if you don't have the courage to see it through, you'll crumble in the moment. You'll crumble under the pressure. There's only one true path to wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and true courage. And that path is through a relationship with Jesus Christ. That is the way, and the only way to true knowledge, true understanding, true wisdom, true courage that will get you through anything that you face in this life. And the thing is that this life is short. And the biggest decision you can make, if you don't know Jesus, is to follow him today. Follow him. Because this life will end someday. And even if you live to be as old as me, you know, that's pretty old. I've seen a few things. But even if you live to be as old as me, it will seem like it went by like that. And you'll come to the end of this life, and there's another whole life waiting on you. Jesus, God gave his one and only son. He gave me two sons. He gave me two sons. One of them I'm really proud of. It's standing right over there. I'm proud of both of them. I'm just sorry that Chase made some of the choices that he did. But I'm going to tell you something. He gave me two sons. He only had one son. I didn't give up my son willingly. I didn't want to give him up. I wouldn't have done it for anything. He loves you so much that he gave up his one and only son so that you could have eternal life. Because guess what? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All. That includes me. That includes every person here. We've all fallen short. None of us are worthy of heaven. None of us are worthy of standing before God. Not one. He paid the price for us. He paid the price for us. That's the best decision you could make, is to follow him today. Put on that pair of shoes. Make that decision. And make that decision to pursue wisdom, knowledge, understanding, and courage. God loves you. I love you. You're all here for a purpose. Live out your purpose. Go forth, prosper, be happy, but live a life for Jesus. Thank you all so much. By the way, there are Bibles up here. We've got some Bibles up here if anybody needs a Bible. If anybody needs some counseling, just somebody to talk to, or whatever, I'm hanging out. I'd love to talk to you. If you just got something you want to share with me, I'm here. I'll be here. So, and Mr. Ward is here as well. So anyway, love you folks. Thank you so much. Appreciate your attention.